Live with CDP Sports Talk, a weekly sports and entertainment podcast sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet. Live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And on audio via Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and TuneIn. Now, here's your host, Chris Palme.
Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to Season 9, Episode 33, overall 473 of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Check out barrycullen.com for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, along with their great selection of all-electric vehicles and Cadillac products as well. You can call the dealership at 519-824-0210. And you can email them at info@barrycullen.com. Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership has been family run and operated here in the city of Guelph since 1969, and yours truly has been a proud customer of Barry Cullen Chevrolet since the year 2000, going on 25 years. Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show is also sponsored by Wellington Brewery at 950 Woodlawn Road West here in Guelph, Ontario. Check out wellingtonbrewery.ca. Try a welly on, and please remember to drink responsibly. I hope everyone's doing well on this Thursday, January 2nd, 2025. Happy New Year to everyone. I am glad to be back. It's been about a week since I've been on here. I apologize. I had to cancel my show Sunday with comedian Latasha Hughes due to food poisoning coming back from Buffalo Saturday night. So the last few days I've been in bed, but I am feeling a lot better, and I'm glad to be back tonight for episode 473 on this Thursday, January 2nd in 2025. Hard to believe. I'm excited to have my guest on tonight. This is, I believe, his fourth or fifth time on my show. He's the host of his own podcast show called the Knee Jerks Podcast, and I'm bringing him on right now. His name is Greg Eno, and he's the co-host of the Knee Jerk Podcast, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Detroit Lions and the Detroit Red Wings. Good evening, Greg. How are you doing?
Chris, thanks for being having me here, and I hope you feel better. I heard you about your little episode there, and I'm glad to see you back up and around.
Yes, it's been a long time. The last time I was this sick was at Tom Brady's first NFL game back in July of 2000 at the Canton Hall of Fame. And I didn't want to go to that game, but my friend dragged me, and now I have that ticket stub, so I might end up getting some money out of that ticket stub at some point.
Well, Tom Brady, it was funny you say that, because I thought you were making a joke when you said the last time I was that sick was watching Tom Brady play. So
literally it was. The last time it was July 31st, 2000. I ended up getting food poisoning down in Canton, Ohio, and I didn't want to leave the hotel room, and my friend dragged me to the game. And so, yeah, I just have to be more careful what I eat at the arenas. And right now I'm just sticking to eating healthy foods and water. And and sleep really helps too. So I'm a lot better, and I'm excited to have you on, Greg, and talk a little bit about the Detroit Lions, the Red Wings, and even the Detroit Pistons. They've been kind of like fun to watch this year so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, 15 and 18, suffered unfortunately a big injury last night as we taped this with Jaden Ivey breaking his leg. But yeah, much more respectable, winning games that they should win, beating teams that they should beat, giving the good teams a battle. They beat, Orlando. I think it was Orlando last night. Orlando's, playing 600 ball. They've beaten the Heat, I think, once or twice. Went out west, won 3-1 out west. Swept the Lakers. They're respectable. I mean, they are on track to win maybe 35 games. They only won 14 all of last year. So yeah, good stuff. JB Bickerstaff, everybody seems to be a buy-in there with the new coach. So good stuff. It's nice to be, to pay attention to them again, quite frankly.
Well, and the wins and losses are nice too, Gray. But from what I see as a fan, is this team is at least competitive again, and they're making the games fun, and winning's a bonus too.
Well, the thing, obviously when you're 14 and 68, there's a lot of problems, but what we've seen in the past several years with the Pistons is their inability to close out games. Now, clearly, when you're losing 68 games, you're probably out of a lot of those games. But they were also in quite a few games too last year, in the last several years, and they just didn't have that experience or that, whatever you want to call it, that missing ingredient to close these games out and they would let teams off the hook in the fourth quarter, or they would themselves get blown out of the gym in the fourth quarter. They just didn't have that. And now it's the opposite. Now they're putting teams away, and the Magic got close. I think the Pistons had like a 16 or 18 point lead at halftime. The Magic got, within 9 or 7. And in the past, we may have seen the Pistons kind of collapse and lose, but they put the gas pedal back on and ended up winning by a substantial margin. So that's the difference. And we've seen with the Lions, it's nice to see young teams learn how to win, learn how to close out games. And in the NBA, it's so hard when you're young. The NBA is just, it punishes young teams. It punishes inexperience, but they're finally starting to get it all together. And Cade Cunningham's having, I think, an all-star year. And he is, without question, one of the reasons why they're doing so well. But don't forget the JB Bickerstaff factor. JB came over here and kind of a surprise hire. I didn't think he was on the radar, Pistons radar. I thought he might even take the year off and not coach at all. And they brought in Trajan Langdon, who hired JB, and JB, who's got a pretty good reputation for working with young players, young teams. Seems to be unlocking the potential of Ivy. Ivy's, until unfortunately last night's injury, was having his breakout year. And they got some veterans now. They got some good veterans to surround the kids. Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., Paul Reed, guys that they're not household names by any stretch, but they're guys that have been around the block in the NBA, who've been there, done that, played with good teams, 7-8 years experience in the league, which is huge. And because you just can't go out there and throw 5 kids out there in the NBA and expect to win a lot of games. It's just too many good, solid, deep, experienced teams out there, to think that's going to be successful. But now they've surrounded the younger players with some veterans, and it's working out so far.
I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but Tom Gore has to be given a little bit of credit. He finally looks like he's hired the right GM, the right coach, and I don't hear sell the team chants at Little Caesars Arena as much this year.
Yeah, it's all about who you hire. The Ford family for years couldn't get it right, and then all of a sudden they hire, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell and Chris Spielman to run, help out in the front office, and it's clicking, and that's what it is. Tom Gore's. I don't think Tom Gore's does not want to win, although at times he does. At times I thought he has seemed to be kind of tone deaf, and he's not been shy to spend money either. I mean, look at all the money he gave Monty Williams, and Monty didn't really want to coach, and that's a whole other story. We could do a whole podcast on just that, but he stuck with it. To his credit, bought out Monty, which is a lot of money to buy out. He bought out Monty. Clearly that wasn't working. Brought in a new front office guy, got rid of clean house in the front office. And and it looks like he's hit now. He's hit the right combination. So it's all about who you hire and staying out of the way, letting them do their job. I mean, he's a long distance absentee owner. He's out in LA. He's not in Michigan. And I know that in this world today, you don't have to be in the city where your team is at because of the way the world is so small with technology. But he's an absentee owner. The Pistons used to have that way back in the 60s and 70s with Fred Zollner when he brought the team over from Fort Wayne. He lived in Florida. He would go to maybe 2 games a year. Tom Gore's, he's out in LA. He's not here. He's here on very rarely. When the Pistons are out west and playing the Clippers or the Lakers or the Kings or a team like that, he'll go out there and watch them then. but he doesn't see him as that often at Little Caesars Arena. But that's hey, you know what? That's okay. Really, you don't even care what the owner does. If the owner is not on the top of your mind, that's a good thing. It's kind of like an umpire in baseball. If you don't know that they're there, you don't know their names, you don't notice them, that's a good thing. And if you have an owner that nobody really cares where he's at or what he's doing, that's all right, because that tells you that there's something going on correctly on the floor. And you're right, no more sell the team chance. This team is fun again, like you said at the top of the discussion, and there's a lot of reason to be. There's a lot of reason to be excited about them.
Absolutely. And right now, the one owner that's on the hot seat in Detroit right now is Chris Illich. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Red Wings and Tigers after. But as for the Detroit Lions, Greg, I'm an Eagles fan, and hopefully we'll run into you guys in a few weeks in the NFC Championship game. But overall assessment on this Lions franchise record, 14-2 season.
Well, hey, again, this is a trajectory that has been ongoing now. This is the third year. First year with Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, 3-13-1. Started out year 2, 1-6, and I was among those. And I'm full disclosure, I was among those that were called Dan Campbell a meathead, that he was a joke hire, that this was a circus. And boy, did he prove me wrong. Since then, Chris, they are 34-9, I believe, in the regular season, which is unbelievable. That's 800 ball in the NFL over the course of almost 3 seasons, 43 games. And that is not easy to do. They were undefeated on the road this year, which is also not easy to do. And it's a total buy-in. It's a total buy-in. I've never seen a turnaround, not only just in terms of wins, losses, Chris, but in terms of the whole makeup of the organization from top to bottom. I know Sheila Ford Hamp gets a lot of credit, as she should, but I don't think even she knew how fast this was going to take off when she hired Holmes and Campbell. Neither of them were household names. Brad Holmes kind of toiled in anonymity with the Rams. He was kind of behind the scenes. He was always known as a really good talent evaluator, a good drafter, but nobody knew he had the chops to be a GM and to make some of the trades he's made. We knew that he could evaluate talent, so his success in the draft isn't all that surprising. But his acumen in building a roster from what they were when he took over. I mean, think about, Chris, that roster that he took over after Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn were fired. It was really poor, and boy, did they get better in a hurry. He hit on just about every draft pick, really every one, almost just about every draft pick he hit on, and there are still most of the players he drafted from 2021, his first year, are still on the team, which is another thing you don't see in the NFL. Most of those players that he drafted in 2021 are still on the roster and are contributing, and they're blossoming. And it's a fascinating story. And you're going to see a lot of teams, Chris, in the NFL that are going to try to replicate that. We're coming up to the end of the season now, and as you know, the Monday after the last game of the season is Black Monday, as they call it in the NFL, where several coaches are probably going to get fired. There's already 3 teams that we know of, 4 teams really looking for coaches that are all being run right now by interim coaches, and I don't think any of those interim coaches are gonna get the permanent job. So at least 3 or 4 teams are going to be looking for coaches starting a week from Monday, and that's not counting all the coaches that may get fired that we don't even know about that are going to get fired on Black Monday. And I can guarantee you, every one of those franchises are going to be looking for their Dan Campbell. Find me my Dan Campbell. I want my Dan Campbell. That's because that's what the NFL is like that. For a while, it was about hire college guys. College guys were the flavor of the month. Then it was let's hire everybody's son. Remember, everybody's son was getting jobs. The Ryans of the world and the Shanahans of the world, and on and on. Everybody's son was getting a job. Now it's all about let's find my Dan Campbell. Let's find my gritty guy who's kind of a meathead kind of a guy. And I know that's I don't mean that to be slanderous,
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? You know, that type of a guy. And everybody's going to be looking for Dan Campbell. And a lot of teams are going to hire Dan Campbell light. And it's not going to work. We know that. But they're going to try to placate their fan base by bringing in somebody who has got that same kind of demeanor. But to be honest with you, I don't know that you can replicate this. I don't know that you could. First of all, Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, Chris, came in to the Lions organization at the same time. Okay, that's the first thing. All these other situations we're talking about in the NFL where they're going to be looking for coaches, they already have their GMs in place. I mean, there may be a couple GMs that might get fired too as well. But when you have the GM and the coach coming in at the same time within weeks of each other, and they're on the same page as much as Campbell and Holmes are, from everything from the drafting decisions to personnel to free agency, that's a chemistry that you just don't say, well, we're going to do that. You can't just say you're going to do that and do it. It's hard. This is going to be fascinating to see how many teams in the NFL try to hire their Dan Campbell.
By the way, Greg, last year the Eagles were 10-1 and they melted down. We all know that.
Yeah.
This year they were 2-2, and I was one of the biggest critics of Nick Sirianni. I wanted him gone. Everyone in Philly wanted him gone. Well, now they're 13-3, and he's 47-20. And whether you like the guy here or not, he just wins. And when he came into Philadelphia, they were in a mess with Doug Peterson being fired. So I see some similarities between the Lions and the Eagles the last 4 years with these franchises.
Yeah, no, you're right. They're similar in everything. They're similar in that, what you just said. They're similar in talent. They're similar in skill set. They're similar in strengths and weaknesses. And, you know, so, yeah. And you mentioned the meltdown last year. You know, they had maybe a little bit of maybe the one difference, Chris, that they're different in those two teams and is maybe the locker room. The locker room in Detroit might be a little bit tighter than it is in Philly. I know last year, I think some locker room issues kind of arose and they kind of snowballed on them. This year, there was that little, if you remember a week or two ago, there was that little mini controversy between the quarterback and the receiver.
Yeah, AJ and Jalen.
Yeah, there was a little bit of are they on the same page? You know, well, but we'll see. I mean, they're a very good team. If the Lions go there, to your point, or whether they play them in Detroit or in Philly for the NFC Championship game, it's gonna be a dogfight. There's no question about it. Those are two very good teams. I would put the Eagles a little bit scary to me than the Vikings because they got the Saquon Barkley factor. I mean, the Vikings don't have. I mean, all due respect to the Vikings, they don't have a back like Barkley. And the Lions really haven't faced a back like Barkley, quite frankly, this year. So it'd be interesting to see. And as we all know, the defense is a little banged up. They've been run on last 5 or 6 games now. That other teams have had a little bit of success running on them. Why? Because they're missing players. They're missing Ali McNeil. They're missing linebackers. They're missing, so Barkley scares me. I mean, he's getting 2,000 yards, the whole 9 yards. I mean, that's a good football team. But that's getting way ahead of ourselves.
Yes.
Right now, there's a big game, of course, Sunday with the Vikings to determine division winner, number 1 seed, the whole 9 yards.
Gotta ask you this, Greg. I know Matt Derry, he covers the Lions on Lockdown podcast. He's a friend of mine too. He called this the biggest regular season game in NFL history. I know it's a huge game, but I don't know if I call it the biggest. I know the Bills and Lions, that was a hell of a game this year too. But I would have rewarded it. It's probably the biggest regular season game in Detroit Lions history, because I don't know if I would say in NFL regular season history, but I would say in Detroit Lions history, this would probably be their biggest regular season game coming up against the Vikings on Sunday Night Football.
Well, I'm Matt has been a guest on the Knee Jerk several times. I've known Matt since the mid '90s. I hired Matt as to do Detroit Titans basketball when I was working in Barton Cablevision. I hired Matt as the play-by-play guy. So Matt and I go back 30 years, and I would push back against you. I think you can make I think I'd agree with Matt. I guess I would challenge anyone and say, okay, name me a bigger one then. If you don't think this one is, that's fine. If you don't think this is the biggest, then give me a bigger one. There's so much at stake right now. You factor in the fact it's not just about the division. It's not just who's going to win the division. That's not it. It's that first round bye.
It's
huge. The Lions so hurt right now, needing just that extra week. And I think Troy Aikman made a good point too, by the way, on Monday night. He said, the Lions had the earliest bye of any team in the NFL. They had a bye in week 5, which means they've played now 11 games in a row, okay, without a bye. And they could use a break. Yeah, I mean, I know that they're not going to tell you that. You go in the locker room and pull the players. They'll never admit to it. But I can tell you that they physically and mentally, they could use a break. They've been playing this high caliber, high intensity, winning every week because they have to. Why? Because the Eagles keep winning, the Vikings keep winning, and for a while the Packers kept winning. And they had to keep winning to keep their number one status, and now they have to do it again. They have to come back out at home. They're it's crazy. They're 14-2 and haven't clinched anything except for a playoff spot, obviously. But they're 14-2, have not clinched the division, have not clinched number one seed. They could win 14 games and go on the road in the first round of the playoffs and not get that extra week of rest. So and then you just look at the whole two teams that are 28-4 combined. I mean, that's the two divisional rivals who have been playing each other for 63 years. I don't know. I tend to agree with Matt. I think this is the big. I just can't think of a bigger one.
Okay, gotta ask you this, Greg. Obviously, it's great for the winner and not so good for the loser. But even who wins this game, they might be out of gas for the first round of the playoffs or even the divisional rounds, possibly.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, they're not going to say it. I mean, and at this time of the year, you do, hey, if you can't get up for this time of the year, there's something wrong. I mean, they'll find, you always find something in the tank at this time of the year. Nobody's ever going to say, well, we lost a playoff game because we were tired or we're run down or worn down. But having said that, there is a physical toll. And I don't, getting mentally, a bye in week 5. You and I could talk about this. We could go off on another tangent, which is should the NFL have 2 byes per year?
The CFL does. The CFL does.
Yeah, I think they should. I think they should. Frankly, I mean, they added a week to the schedule. Now it's 17 games, and they obviously, they took away a preseason game, but still, they added a regular season game. And they still just have the 1 bye. And I just, for teams that took a bye back in early October, late September. Yeah. And now here you are, it's January and you're still playing football. Sometimes I think the NFL thinks that these players are robots, and they're not. I mean, we see it every week, how many players get hurt. That extra, I don't know. I think that I would like to see an extra bye week, even if that means the regular season goes to the second week of January. And that puts the Super Bowl in mid-February. That's okay. I just think that these guys need that. I mean, it's such a brutal, violent game, and you don't know how brutal and violent it is until you watch it at field level at real-time speed. These guys are hitting each other. When you do see video of that, it looks like somebody speeded the video up, but they didn't. That's how fast they are, and that's how when they hit each other. You might even feel it at home when you watch it on television, but it's nothing like it is in person.
And covering the CFL with the Toronto Argonauts, they went to 18 games back in 1986, and I like their system, and I also like the fact that they have 2 bye weeks, and I think they're even talking about maybe a 3rd bye week at one point. But they have an issue too there, like they do with the NFL, because of the TV contract. Sometimes they make these teams play 3 games in 9 days on short notice, and it's just not. It's not good football, and it leads to more injuries. And we could go on this for about 2 or 3 hours.
Right. Agreed.
All right, Greg. Next question. Thoughts on their latest comeback win over the Niners, who gave them a hell of a fight as best they could. And how big were those 2 interceptions by Kirby Joseph, who seems to be very underrated in the secondary for that team?
Well, you think so? He didn't even make the Pro Bowl. How about that? Kirby Joseph, who leads the NFL, maybe the entire league I know he's got 9 interceptions. It certainly leads the NFC. It may lead the entire league. 9 interceptions, did not make the Pro Bowl. His partner in the safety partner, Brian Branch, did make the Pro Bowl. Kirby Joseph didn't. I don't know why. I don't know how. But yeah, that was huge. We talked a few minutes ago about the banged up defense, and Brock Purdy was having his way, and There was no pass rush, and they were marching right down the field and scoring in every possession. And it looked like the Lions were going to have to score 45 points just to keep up. And here comes Joseph. Now, the first one was, a gimme, playing center field. He threw it right at him. But the second one was maybe even bigger. He jumped the route, read Purdy's eyes all the way, jumped in front of Pearsall, and made the interception at a time where I think arguably a bigger time of the game. But yeah, I mean, the Lions had not been getting takeaways, Chris, for about 4 games in a row. And that was part of the reason why they were struggling. They weren't flipping the ball. They weren't flipping the possession. They just weren't getting off the field, and they weren't taking the ball away. And so that put a lot of stress on them as well. And they were subjecting themselves to long drives, 12, 13, 14 plays. But here comes Joseph, and that totally changed the complexion of the game. And I noticed in the second half that the adjustment that they made was Aaron Glenn was dialing up some more blitzes than he was in the first. And as you know, the Lions love to play man defense, but they weren't getting a pass rush in the first half, and that's why Purdy was having his way with them. And they dialed up some pressure in the second half, which I think helped. And I think that Purdy, here's the thing. You look at these two quarterbacks, Brock Purdy and Jared Goff, okay? And I know that Purdy led them to the NFC, to the Super Bowl last year, and beat the Lions. That's true. But what's the difference? The difference between the great elite quarterbacks, and I put Jared Goff in that class, and guys like Purdy, who are good, but not great. We saw that on Monday. Guys like Purdy will throw those picks, and guys like Goff won't. And that's exactly what happened on Monday. Now, is Goff perfect? No. Has he thrown interceptions? Yes. He had 5 against the Texans, as we all know. The Lions still won. Well, yeah, okay. You're going to have a day like that. Everybody is. But the interceptions that Purdy threw on Monday night, that's the difference between he and Goff. Goff did make those kind of throws. Goff didn't throw those interceptions. Purdy did. And in a game like that, where it's up and down, up and down, up and down, it's a track meet. You give away a possession like that, and the Lions scored, of course, on both of those possessions. Flips the score, flips the momentum, flips everything, and you could see it in Purdy. Purdy was frustrated. He looked like he was kind of having his way with the Lions, and no concern, no stress. Throws those 2 picks, and the look on his face, you could just tell. The kind of the air kind of got sucked out of the building. Fans were go quiet. And this was a game, Chris, the Lions didn't really have to win. I mean, from a standing perspective, they didn't have to.
What about the tiebreaker?
What's that?
If they had lost this game, wouldn't Minnesota have like a half a game ahead of them? Or this game was absolutely meaningless?
Literally, it didn't mean anything because it would have. I mean, the Vikings would have been in first place for a week. They would have been 14-2. The Lions would have been 13-3. But the Lions winning next week would have canceled that out because that head-to-head is the first tiebreaker, and the Lions have already beaten the Vikings, so they would be 2-0 against the Vikings. So they would both end up with 14-3 records in that scenario, but it wouldn't have mattered. So, but tell that to the players. The players knew what happened last year on that field. They know what. I mean, I know it's not the NFC Championship game, but it's still that's the team that knocked them out. That's the team that denied them the Super Bowl. They were 30 minutes away from making it to the Super Bowl, and all hell broke loose in the second half. It was a nightmare second half. And don't tell me that the Lions weren't thinking about that the whole game. And they wanted to win that game. And there's no such thing in Dan Campbell land as a meaningless game.
And that leads to my next question, by the way. Do you feel Jared Goff should be included with the MVP talk along with Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, and Lamar Jackson, and even Joe Burrow for that degree for what he's done in Cincinnati?
Yeah, I think the thing, though, Chris, that makes me not say that he should be, and is that he doesn't. And I look at the most valuable player. Okay, what does that mean? Well, to me, it means a player that is valuable in multiple ways. Okay, now if you want to say, if you're just going to give out an award that says who's the best passer or the best quarterback, for example, like they do in baseball, silver sluggers and stuff, different positions. Yeah, I think he's in the conversation, but I just look at guys like Allen and Jackson And Barkley's not a quarterback, obviously, but Allen and Jackson do things with their legs that Jared Goff just can't do. I mean, he's not that kind of a guy, and that's fine. You can't make somebody into something he's not. That's the thing. If you saw, you saw the game, I presume you saw the game between the Bills and the Lions. You saw
game of the year. That was the game of the year from what I saw.
Yeah, you saw how Josh Allen is a wrecking machine, a quarterback with his legs and with his everything, and he does things that, let's face it, Jared Goff can't do physically. Nothing against Jared. He's a pocket passer. He gets into trouble when that pocket play. He doesn't have the elusiveness that Allen does, or Jackson, or some of the other quarterbacks in the NFL. Just doesn't have it. So that's what keeps me from saying he's MVP, because I just can't put him above what Allen does for the Bills, and what these other players do for their teams. I just can't do it. And it's not his fault. It's not Goff's fault. It's just that's just not the way he's built.
How much of an impact has Ben Johnson had on Jared Goff? Because obviously he took the Rams to a Super Bowl with Sean McVay, but he didn't leave on really good terms. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on how much of an impact Ben Johnson has had on Jared Goff, like Brian Daboll had with Josh Allen in Buffalo.
Yeah, that's a good question, because we talked about Holmes and Campbell coming in at the same time. So did Goff. They all came in together. They all joined the Lions in 2021. All that happened right in January of 2021. The hiring of Holmes, the hiring of Campbell, the trade of Stafford for Goff, all that happened in January, okay? And Ben Johnson at the time, if you remember, was the tight ends coach, believe it or not. He was a tight ends coach in 2021, was promoted to passing game coordinator in 2022. They had fired the first offensive coordinator, and his name escapes me, the former head coach of the Chargers. Shame on me for forgetting his name.
I'm trying to too. I just can't remember.
I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Anyway, they fired him halfway through the first season. Well, didn't fire him. They stripped him of his play calling duties halfway through that first season, and then they fired him at the end of the year. Okay, it didn't work. Oh, Anthony.
Oh
God, darn it.
I know who you're talking about.
I know who I'm talking about. Okay,
yes.
So then they promoted Ben Johnson to passing game coordinator. Okay, and then he promoted him again to offensive coordinator. So his quarterback coach is officially Mark Brunell. As you know, Mark Brunell was a longtime NFL quarterback, left-hander.
Good quarterback.
Played for the Jaguars. Played for the Redskins and maybe some other teams. So, that's officially his quarterback coach. But there's no question that an offensive coordinator has a lot of sway over a quarterback, clearly. They seem to have a great relationship. But you know what? I think what you're seeing, though, Chris, you mentioned how things ended badly in LA. I really don't like the way Sean McVay handled that situation. It was a very, I thought, too public. It was a very public parting of the ways. And I don't like that. I don't like it when coaches. I'll tell you a story one time. Bart Starr, the great Bart Starr, told the story of how one day in practice, this was early on in Vince Lombardi's tenure with the Packers. Vince had come over from the Giants and was, offensive coordinator for the Giants and took over the Packers. And early on in that tenure, he, I guess, apparently at a practice one day, laid into Bart Starr in front of the whole team. I mean, just yelled at him, Tormanu, what hole. Afterward, Bart Starr privately told Vince, he said, if I have a butt chewing coming, do it to me in private. Don't ever talk to me like that in front of my teammates again, because how can I go out there and lead the team if you're going to talk to me like that in front of them? And he said after that, Vince never did that again. And obviously the results speak for themselves. They won all those championships. I don't like the way that Sean McVay publicly kind of dragged Jared Goff through the mud, demoted him, kind of went out of his way to not say nice things about him. I just don't like the way it ended. It was just a weird way I don't know what was going through his head. Now, it obviously worked out well for them initially because they won the Super Bowl with Stafford in the first year. But I think Goff is where he wants to be. He's beloved here. The people that he plays for want him here. He has a great relationship with Ben and with Dan. He's loved by the fans, clearly.
Oh yes.
And he said, look, that's the best thing that could have happened to me was to be traded to Detroit. But I don't like the way it went down. I don't like Sean McVay for that. I'm not a big Sean McVay fan. He's made out to be this genius guy. He's this young genius, and I don't know how much of that is really even true. I don't like the way he treated Goff at the end, and I know they got the ring, good for them, but just not a fan of that. And I think I don't know that I would say, hey, it's all because he's got a great, Ben Johnson is helping him out. I think he's just in a place that likes him. It's a place that he was wanted, and that's all he wanted to be. I think was wanted.
In terms of old-time great Detroit athletes right now, where do you put Jared Goff up there right now? I guess because everywhere they go, even the Red Wing fans that travel on the road games, I saw in Buffalo, they were chanting Jared Goff, and I was going to say, what makes the fans love him so much? It's obviously his talent, but is it, I guess, because he wants to be in Detroit and wants to be a Detroit Lion?
I think they see, and what I'm going to say is kind of cliche because you've heard it a lot about Detroit, and it kind of gets said almost too much sometimes, and I hope it doesn't lose its meaning. But Detroit embraces those they can relate to that. They can relate to people who've been down, who've been unwanted, who have been kind of cast aside, and Detroit really relates to that. They do. They relate to that as a city and as a fan base. And I think they see a lot of themselves in Goff. Winning doesn't hurt, clearly. Now, the chance, I think sometimes, Chris, I think that kind of goes beyond just how I think sometimes that gets into almost trendy stuff. Like, let's just chant almost like a social media trend. Let's chant Jared Goff's name wherever we can, just because we can. I think that it gets kind of, last night, for example, the Pistons game, after Ivy went down, the fans started chanting Jared Goff. It's like, that's kind of tone deaf, isn't it? One of your best players just broke his leg and you're going to chant Jared Goff. Sometimes I think they overdo that kind of stuff. So, but back to Goff, I just think that his place in Detroit is because the fans look at, and this is unusual because he's a California kid, as you know. He's California through and through. He grew up in California. He went to college in California. He played for the Rams. He's as California as it gets. And blue collar Detroit usually doesn't embrace, left coast people like that. But they see in him kind of a little bit what they see in themselves. A cast aside, in this case, city, a cast aside team, quite frankly, that nobody respected. And they see in him, it kind of personifies, it's kind of a metaphor. Jared Goff is like a metaphor for what the fans of Detroit have gone through.
I see a little similarity with Josh Allen. Josh Allen is a California kid. Nobody wanted to draft him. The Bills drafted him in 2018. Raw talent, wasn't expected to do much, and he's embraced Buffalo as much as they have embraced him. And that's the same way I see with Jared Goff in Detroit. And Greg, I got to ask you this. What is Jared Goff's biggest strengths as the quarterback of the Detroit Lions?
Well, this is again going to sound cliche, but it's his leadership. But from a skill set perspective, he's a very accurate passer. He can throw into tight windows. We see it all the time. Even in tight coverage, when guys are draped over the receiver, he gets it. He gets where only the receiver can catch it. He's got a flair for that. He's cool cool as a cucumber when it comes to those fourth down conversions. He doesn't get rattled. I know sometimes he looks like he's got happy feet back there because he's not mobile, but I think that's because he's not mobile. I don't think it's because he's got happy feet. I think he just doesn't have the ability to escape. But from a pure quarterback skill set perspective, it's his accuracy. But beyond that, the players love him. The players absolutely love him, and they believe in him. And it's feeding off each other. The more that he believes in them, the more that they believe in him, and vice versa. And the whole Detroit thing we just talked about. He's just found his comfort zone, and those are things that may not seem like they mean a lot on the field, but they do, and it's showing clearly.
What areas of concern do you have for the Lions defense going into this Sunday night game against the Minnesota Vikings at Ford Field?
Pass rush. Again, like I said, they dialed up some blitzes in the second half against the 49ers, and I think that was effective to a degree. Sam Darnold, talk about cast-offs. I mean, he's another one, even more so than Goff, really. He's been lights out. But if they don't get to him, Justin Jefferson, and there's other guys that can hurt you, Hawkinson. That's going to be a long afternoon. So it's the pass rush that to me kind of is the engine that drives everything. If you get a pass rush on any quarterback in the NFL, that just leads to so many things. It's the driver of your defense, I think. In this pass happy league, no pass rush in this pass happy NFL is not good. That's what scares me most about this Vikings game is if Darnold has all the time. Look what Purdy did to the Lions. That's Brock Purdy. Look what he did to the Lions. Yep. Right. And of course, we all know what Allen did to them and so forth. Why? A lot of it's because they couldn't get the pass rush. Now with Allen, when they did get some pass rush, he's got the elusiveness to escape and to gain yards with his legs. Darnold's not that way. He's not immobile, but he's not Josh Allen. So if they can get some pressure on him, and I'm not telling you anything that any other football person would tell you, if they can get pressure on him, they have a shot. If Darnold's going to just sit back there comfortably and have 3 to 5 seconds of looking through his reads, it's going to be tough. So that's what scares me. I'm not as concerned about the run defense, although at times lately it's been a little soft. I'm worried about the pass rush or lack thereof. And we'll see if Aaron Glenn dials up blitzes from the get-go. He didn't do it until the second half on Monday. We'll see if he comes out of the gate with blitzes.
That crowd's going to be huge too. And one of the keys I think is going to be a key in this game too. The Lions need to get off to a good start to get that crowd really into the game. But I also feel like turnovers are going to be a big factor in this game. If the Lions defense can get a couple of turnovers and get that ball to the offense and with a short field, that would help them as well against the Vikings.
Yeah, and if they get Alex Anzalone back, which they might at linebacker, he's practicing now. If they get him back, that's huge. The linebacking core has been kind of torched in the last several weeks, both in the running game and the short passing game. They need Anzalone back in the worst way. We know they're not going to get Hutchinson back, so you can't count on that. They're not going to get Lee McNeil back, so you can't count on that. There's a lot of players they're not going to get back, but they could get Anzalone back, and that would be huge. He's like their quarterback on defense. He does so many things for that unit. So if they get him back, they've got it. That's better. But yeah, but really it boils down to the pass rush. If they don't get a pass rush against Darnold, it could prove the difference in the game.
The Vikings are probably one of the best teams or the best team in football this year, winning the close games. Well, one game they did lose by 2 points was to the Detroit Lions, 31-29 at U.S. Bank Field in Minnesota. I still want to call it the Metrodome.
Yeah.
And I can see this game being very close again, but I also see it being high scoring, Greg. Yeah. Do you feel this will be a defensive battle? I think it's going to be back and forth.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. I think it's going to be similar to what we saw on Monday night, similar to what we saw against Buffalo. Up and down, lots of points. I think the over/under should they really, I don't know what it's at, but it should be around in the high 50s if not higher than that. Yeah, it's going to be it when kind of whoever scores last might win, which is kind of what happened in Minnesota. If you think back to that game, it's like whoever scored last won, and there was the Lions. They overcame a brutal turnover late in that game and still found the will to on the road to win. And I think that might have been the first game without Hutchinson, I think, on top of it all. So they were battling a lot of things. They were on the road. They were without Hutchinson. They were down. They turned the ball over. Everything was going against them. The crowd was going crazy. It just didn't look like it was in the cards. But they came back and they pulled it out. But you're right. Look at the Chiefs with the close games too. The teams that's what happens in the NFL. So many games, and you've watched the NFL for a long time. So many games in every week are one possession games. So many of them. And so many games turn on one or two plays in the course of a game. And those one or two plays don't have to be in the fourth quarter, by the way. They could happen in the second quarter, the first quarter, the third quarter. Just a couple plays, they go the other way, could, turn the game around. So playing in close games, and I use that quotation marks because to me, a one possession game could be anywhere from 1 point to 8 points. Playing in a close one possession game is very typical in the NFL. Even the bad teams play one possession games. The difference is the bad teams usually make that one mistake, or they don't make the play that the other team does make, and that's why they lose. That's why the Giants are 3-13. That's why the Bears are 4-12. All these 4-12, 3-13, 4-12, 5-11 teams are that way because they don't make the plays, or they have the other team making the plays against them. That's the difference.
Well, look at the Niners, too. The difference in that game, nobody brings up. Jake Bates, Mr. Reliable for the Lions, and Jake Moody, the Michigan alumni, missed 2 field goals and an extra point. That was 7 points right there. And that can be the difference in a game, too, is your kickers.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. The kicking for sure. Moody has had a rough year, no question, especially from long distance. I've been watching the NFL for 54 years. I've never seen so many 50-yard plus kicks made in my life as I've seen in the last couple of years. A 55-yard kick is the new 45. It used to be when you watch a football game, if a guy hit like a 48-yarder, that was a decent length kick. And if you try to kick like a 52, 53, it's like, oh my, I don't know. And when somebody made a 53, 54-yard kick, it was a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal. Now, these kids are popping these balls in from 57, 58 yards like it's an extra point. It's amazing the leg strength some of these kickers have now. It's, of course, the accuracy, you got to have that too. But Moody, yeah, I mean, you're right. He missed a couple of them. Again, body language, I saw the look on his face after he missed the extra point. Rough year. A lot of Lions fans wanted the Lions to draft Moody, if you remember that. And they didn't, of course. I think the Niners drafted him like the third round, I think, which is kind of high to draft a kicker in the third round. And they're not getting their return on their investment right now.
And also, too, covering the CFL, I seen kickers hit 55 to 60 yards. And Greg, I had Bob Sochi on my show a couple of months ago from the New England Patriots on 98.5 The Sports Hub. And Bob thinks it's just a matter of time before we see a 70-yard kick in the NFL.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's right. I was one of my first memories of watching pro football was watching at home with my dad in the living room, watching Tom Dempsey beat the Lions with a 63-yard field goal in 1970. I remember like it was yesterday. I was 7 years old. And how many years went by before we saw anything close to that after Tom's kick? Many, many years went by. Now, all of a sudden, now you're starting to see, with guys like Justin Tucker and legs like that, you're seeing kicks routinely in the high 50s, low 60s. And, of course, Dempsey's record's been, broken several times since then. So, yeah, and I think what's the record now? 65, 66 now?
66. I think 66.
So, yeah, I mean, 4 more yards, sure. I mean, it probably would come like either at the end of a game or the end of a half, is one that's likely to happen. If a team's going to try that, they might try it at the end of a half. I think that's when Dempsey's record got broken. I want to say Jason Elam broke it at the end of a half when there was no time left to do anything else but try a kick. I think that's how that, and I think Janikowski kicked a long one like that too in the 60s. So it's and that's why Dempsey himself, that kick was at the end of the game. The Saints only tried that because they really didn't think they had any other hope to win the game. So they decided to put Tom in to kick a 63-yarder. At the time that Tom hit that kick, by the way, the old record was a guy named Burt Rechichar of the Giants. I think he played or the Colts, one of the two. 56 yards was the record. So Dempsey shattered that record by 7 yards at the time. And that kick by Rechichar was in the 50s. 1950s, and Dempsey was in 1970s. So that's how many years went by before anybody came close to even, to breaking. I don't even know how many people tried a 57-yarder or longer to break Rechichar's record. The only reason that Dempsey tried that kick is because the Saints had no other option but to try it. They were down by 1 point. What do we have to lose? We'll put him in there, see what happens, and damned if he didn't do it.
Overall, how do you feel the Detroit Lions special teams have been? And also, too, if you want to win in the playoffs, you need your defense, your offense, and special teams. And Jake Bates has been Mr. Reliable for this team this year.
Well, Jack Fox, it's funny. Jack Fox is one of the best punters, if not the best punter in the league. And I'm not just talking about in terms of numbers. I mean, I'm talking about in terms of ball placement, kicks, buried inside the 10, flipping field position. It's not just about how many balls you bury inside the 10. And I know that's the sexy number, but really it's how many times have we seen Jack Fox when the Lions are like on their own 30, for example, flip field position with like a 65 yard punt because he kicks the ball and all of a sudden now the ball's fielded or downed inside the other team's 30-yard line. Totally flipping field position around where it looks like you were going to lose the field position battle. Jack Fox, nuclear kicks it, 60 yards and completely flips the script. And so he doesn't get a lot of, because why? Because a lot of times he doesn't even punt. The Lions are going for it on fourth down so much. I don't think he punted. In fact, I don't think he punted on Monday. I know he didn't punt on Monday. He doesn't punt very often, but when he does, it seems like when he does punt, they always need a big kick from him, and he always delivers, almost always delivers a big kick. And it reminds me of Ray Guy, who is, was played the longtime kicker punter for the Raiders.
Hall of Fame.
And now Ray, I want to say was a first-round draft pick, if you can imagine. In 1972, no lower than second round. First or second round, I think it was first round, by the Raiders. And everybody, of course, laughed, drafting a punter in the first round. But John Madden said, after we got Ray Guy, fourth down wasn't so bad anymore because Ray had this ability to kick hang time 4 or 5 seconds, bury the football. I remember writing a column about Ray Guy several years ago when he went in the Hall of Fame. And it might have been the first punter, I think, that went in the Hall of Fame. And dropping, balls inside the 10 routinely. And he was a weapon. And Al Davis, to his credit, drafted Ray Guy in the first round in 1972, and everybody laughed. Man, what are you doing drafting a punter in the first round? But Ray Guy was every bit a part of the Raiders' success as anyone in that team.
Wanted to get your final thoughts on the Lions-Vikings game. How do you see this game going, and who could be an X factor for the blue and silver, or I should say the black Lions?
Oh, that's a good question. Who could be an X factor? That's a good question. Well, I think who could be an X factor is if somebody on the defense, we saw, for example, several weeks ago from my alma mater, Pat O'Connor, defensive lineman from Eastern Michigan, practice squad player most of the year, got elevated because of all the injuries to the defensive line. And I can't remember which game it was. It was certainly in the second half of the season. Within the last 4 or 5 weeks, I think, had a big game. He got some quarterback pressures, got a sack or two. He was kind of a force. He was to the point where the announcers were talking about, Pat O'Connor, this is his breakout game. I think if somebody, Chris, has a game like that on the defense, somebody you don't expect to, it kind of comes out of nowhere, whether it's with quarterback pressures or maybe a strip and sack or punches a ball out, makes a fumble recovery, somebody that you wouldn't expect. I think that's the kind of player that might be that X factor. I know I'm kind of being wishy-washy because I'm not giving you a name, but somebody like that you go into the game, you don't really think twice about him, but by the end of the game, you look back and go, oh my God, what a big play that was by fill in the blank. I think that's the kind of thing it's like the Joseph factor. Now, Joseph's he's not a nobody. I get it, but that game was not going well defensively until Joseph made those interceptions. So I think that's what it's going to take, Chris, is for the Lions to get that big play defensively. It could even be a really key pass defense. It could even be a knockaway. It doesn't even have to be an interception. Maybe it's 3rd and 10 and somebody gets his hand in front of Justin Jefferson's face and knocks the ball, makes it an incomplete pass, gets the Vikings off the field. It could be something like that. That just kind of turns things around. It's going to be a razor thin difference between these two teams. I don't think either of them is going to blow the other one out. There's going to be a play like that. It could happen on the other side too. It could be the Vikings to make a play like that. But it's going to be something like that, I think, that's going to come from someone who's not a household name that's going to kind of turn this thing around, I think.
I have the Lions winning this game 34-31, and I see Mr. Jake Bates hitting the winning field goal. But I do feel there's going to be a turnover or two in this game that's going to make the difference.
The Lions have been good about not turning the ball over. That's one thing. They really haven't turned the ball over too much. I know you throw that Goff 5 interception game out the window. Other than that, they don't fumble as a rule. They really don't. Goff doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. They don't muff punts. You know, they're really a clean football team. They really are. Do they make penalties? Yes. But as far as turning the ball over, they're pretty clean. They play pretty clean football. So I think the turnover thing you're talking about would be more likely coming from the Lions getting a turnover than they making a turnover.
Absolutely. And also, too, I feel discipline's going to be huge in this game. You don't want to be taking any dumb 15-yard penalties either.
Right.
So you're going to have to control your emotions. But I do feel Detroit's going to win this game 34-31. I do feel Gibbs is going to have a really good game. Hey, before we get to the Red Wings, Greg, before I let you go, what's the time frame on David Montgomery coming back for the Lions this year, if at all?
Well, you know, the initial prognosis was not good. The initial prognosis was surgery, which would have put him out for the year for sure. Then they kind of went doctor shopping until they found somebody that said that, no, you don't need surgery. We can rehab this, and you could be good to go in 3 to 4 weeks. So now they're talking. I don't think he'll play this week, although they're not ruling it out. But I don't think he will. But if they get, you know, and that's why that first round is so important as well. I think I think the game plan now is to see him in the playoffs. Just don't know when, but I think at this point we're going to see him in a playoff game for sure.
Absolutely. Hey, Greg, do you have a few more minutes for a couple of Red Wing questions?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, Greg. Just thoughts on Steve Yzerman finally pulling the plug on head coach Derek Lalonde after 2.5 years, and it's been a long time since I believe the Red Wings fired a coach during the season. I think maybe Harry Neal was the last one, I believe.
You're absolutely right. It was Harry Neal, 1985, right around this time of the year, as a matter of fact, late December. I think what Steve saw was what we all saw, a dispirited hockey team. A lot of the fun had gone out of the room. A lot of the energy had been zapped. The losing was weighing on them. They weren't having fun. You know, it wasn't fun going to the rink. It wasn't fun. Now, not to say that you have to have fun to be successful, but I mean, it was showing the body language on the ice. So many players, it seemed to, I don't know if they've deliberately checked out, but it felt like they checked out. You know, even Larkin, Kane, you know, there's some guys that just didn't look like they were into it. And I think he saw that. I think Steve saw that. Now, he told the press that he had made his mind up about 2 weeks ago that he probably was going to have to do this. And then when they were booed off the ice a week ago Monday against the Blues, they were shut out 4-0, which followed double dip losses to the Canadiens, in which they played horribly in the second game in Montreal. That cemented it. Now, he had reached out to Todd McClellan about 10 to 14 days ago and said, be ready. I might make a move. Would you be interested? And of course, McClellan, who's wanting to coach, said, yes, of course I'd be interested. So he kind of had McClellan. That's why this whole thing went down so fast. You know, it was because usually when coaches, Chris, get fired in midseason, although in Boston, it didn't happen in Boston, or it didn't happen in St. Louis, because it was Boston who fired Montgomery.
Yes.
And then he was hired like almost immediately
by the Blues.
Yeah, right. Or like a week later or something. But usually when you fire a coach mid-season, it's an interim coach. It's an interim situation.
Yes.
You bring a guy in, he coaches the rest of the year. He has no chance of getting the full-time job. He's just there because he's convenient. Usually it's an assistant. Sometimes they'll promote a coach from the minor leagues. But this time it was out with Lalonde and in with McClellan simultaneously, and that doesn't happen very often in the NHL. So it clearly had been in the works. And Steve admitted, I reached out to Todd about 10 days to 2 weeks ago, and I said, I might have to make a change. And then when they lost those games in Montreal and then got booed off the ice just before Christmas to the Blues, against the Blues, he made up his mind. Yzerman did, and the arrangements were made. I'm not sure what the terms were. I don't know what the terms are of McClellan's contract. I have no idea how many years he's got. No idea. They said multi-year. I don't know if that means 2 or 3 after the season. I have no idea. I would be surprised if it wasn't at least 3 after this season's over with. And there it is. And already, I think we're seeing a difference in the way they're playing.
Back-to-back wins against the very good Washington team and Pittsburgh game. Obviously, the opening night against the Toronto Maple Leafs with McClellan wasn't good. Gotta ask you this. Do you feel McClellan and Trent Yanni can bring enough to this team to make a playoff push? I guess they're only 6 points out of a playoff spot, and there's still a lot of games left. But do you feel this new coaching staff can get the most out of this team that's with this roster as it is?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because on the one hand, it's funny because just 2 weeks ago, playoffs would be like, no way. What are you talking about? But like you said, the gap isn't that much.
No.
But there's still a learning curve with the new coach. And I don't think that the team is going to tell you that we want to try to make the playoffs, of course. But I don't think Todd McClellan, of course, Todd McClellan would love to make the playoffs, of course, but I don't think his McClellan and Yanni's mission right now is, I don't think they're thinking anything about playoffs right now. I think they're just trying to get their meat hooks into this team, find out how it makes them tick. He said that they're really putting a lot of emphasis on defense right now and the PK, trying to keep the puck out of their own net. That's their emphasis right now, not so much on the offense. Keep the puck out of our own nets. That's their emphasis now. That's what all their practice time is pretty much focusing on defense. Even though they've got a multitude of problems they've got a lot more to worry about than just that, but they can't address everything right now. There's not enough time. There's no training camp. They've got a very busy schedule coming up. There's not going to be a lot of practice time. So they're just going to be able to install whatever they think they can in a relatively short period of time and hope that the players buy into that. I think that the fans' expectations are low. I don't think they think there's a playoff push in this team, although they're encouraged by what they saw the last 2 nights. But it's still, I know you say 6 points and it doesn't sound like a lot, but 6 points in the NHL, you usually don't make that up in a week. It takes a little while because you need other teams to lose. It's especially now you get a point for losing, which I never liked. You get a point for losing in overtime or in a shootout. Teams can get a point and still come out on the other end of the stick. It's hard to make up 6, points. It really is. It doesn't seem like a lot on January 2nd because it looks attainable. But those teams are going to win some games too. A lot of teams have to lose. That's what I'm trying to say. A lot of teams have to lose for you to, and you have to keep winning for you to make up 6 points. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's more. It's more than you. Because essentially you have to win like 3 more games than the other teams do between now and the end of the year. That's hard to do.
Steve Yzerman on the hot seat right now in the city of Detroit with his team.
Depends on who you ask. Is he on the hot seat with the fans? Yes. Is he on the hot seat with the Ilitch family? No, absolutely not. As long as Marian Ilitch draws a breath, Steve Yzerman will not be in the hot seat ever. That's just the way it is. Now that's because why? Because Steve Yzerman's like a son to her, and he was like a son to Mike Ilitch. They drafted him when he was 18 years old. He went right into the starting lineup. He was the captain by age 21. That's all he's known as Red Wings, and his time in Tampa aside. No, I mean, never say never, of course, I suppose, but no, I don't think that's ever going to happen. It just isn't. He's pretty much got carte blanche, I think, as long as he wants. I know the fans don't want to hear that. I just don't see any circumstance unless they went completely unless they completely went south when they were like the worst team in the league 2 or 3 years in a row. Yeah, maybe. But as long as Marian Illich is alive, that will not happen. I'm convinced of it.
Do you see Yzerman tweaking this roster before the trade deadline?
Well, the Red Wings won't be. If you're asking me, are they going to be buyers? No. Will they sell some pieces? Maybe, but I don't know what they can sell. You look at the roster, and I know they've won a couple of games, and that's great since McClellan took over. But the roster is still what it is. It's not there's a reason that, I mean, I know you can put a lot of blame on the old coach. Fine. That's deserved. Yeah. The bottom line is they're not very good. They're just not very good. There's a lot of holes on that team. Patrick Kane is waking up a little bit. He's waking up a little bit. Tarasenko is a terrible signing. He's given them nothing, absolutely nothing. Jeff Petrie should be blown to the sun as far as I'm concerned. There's a lot of players that they're just not very good. So I don't know what they would even do, Chris, at the deadline. Would a team want Kane for a stretch run? Maybe. But what are you going to get for him? He's on the last year he's on a 1-year deal. He's 36 years old. What are you going to get for him? A 4th-round pick, maybe? I don't know. If that. I don't know what they could do. I don't know who they could flip at the deadline that would make this situation appreciably better. Usually when you make a move like that at the deadline, you're looking to the future, obviously, if you're a seller. But you have to have something to sell. And I don't know that there's a lot on that roster short of, because they're not going to trade. They get scoring from one line only. They get scoring from DeBrincat, Larkin, who had been in a slump, and Raymond. Other than that, nobody scores. And if they do score, it's rare. Okay. So they've got like 3 forwards or 4 maybe that score. And the other, 8 forwards, because there's 12 in a game. The other 8 don't score. And in this league, Chris, it's about putting the puck in the net. Nobody's going to make a trade deadline deal for a Chris Draper type. Those days are long gone. You're not going to trade a trade deadline move to get a checker. If you're going to make a trade deadline move, it's to get a scorer. Somebody's going to put the puck in. You're not going to go down the stretch drive and try to check your way to the Stanley Cup playoffs. You got to score your way there. So I don't know that there's anybody on the roster as it's currently constructed that would bring back anything that's going to change the trajectory of this rebuild. This is pretty much what you've got until the spring and summertime.
Well, it looks like it's going to be a 9th year in a row with no playoffs. So I guess Steve Yzerman should talk to Joe Dumars, because Joe Dumars was a Detroit legend, and at the end of his time with the Pistons, the fans turned on him. So Yzerman, I guess, has to get used to it. He's got to understand too, the fan base hasn't seen a playoff game since 2016. So hopefully
he knows that.
So, hey, finally, Greg, where can my audience follow you on social media and your next Substack article that you're working on, and your next Knee Jerks podcast with Nick and Big Al?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think maybe it's on the screen. I can't see if it's on the screen or not, but my Substack is gregeno.substack.com. If you subscribe to that, I will be in your inbox pretty much every Monday, sometimes twice a week, but certainly every Monday with a new piece. I would appreciate if you did that. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno, and I'm also on Blue Sky, Greg Eno as well. Blue Sky, Greg Eno on Blue Sky, Greg Eno on Twitter, gregeno.substack.com. Big Al and Nick Milanovich and I record the Knee Jerks every other Monday, which we will be doing. The next show is coming up in the 13th of January. We'll be doing the next show. And usually we'll have a guest. Sometimes we don't have a guest. It doesn't matter. The 3 of us will still fill the air with our hot air every other week. But we have a lot of fun doing it. Al and I have been doing the program since 2009, believe it or not. I can't believe it. So we're going on 16 years now, which is pretty fascinating when you think about it. In the podcast world, I think we were probably one of the first ones that were
originals.
Sports podcasters to even begin with. So we're proud about that, but there's a lot of good things to talk about now. The Pistons are ascending. Tigers made the playoffs. Lions, of course, are very good. Red Wings at least changed their coach. So there's a lot to talk about with these teams now.
And obviously the Lions are the number one team. But hey, Greg, I want to say thank you for giving us over an hour of your time tonight to talk about the Detroit Lions and a little bit about the Red Wings. And hopefully maybe we can have you back on again during the NFL playoffs. And I'm hoping to see a Philadelphia Detroit NFC title game. But in these NFL playoffs, one bad game and you're out, and there's no guarantee. So I guess just enjoy the game on Sunday night against Minnesota. Are you going to be at Ford Field or watching from home?
I'll be in the comfort of my own home. I haven't done the Ford Field thing in many, many years. I'm just as happy to be at home in front of my big screen TV with my cold ones. And my wife has been really into the team this year as well. She's been a big fan. She and I watch the games together. It's a lot of fun.
Very likable team. Greg, thank you so much again for coming on, and give me a little time tonight and I'll send you the video, the audio, and continued success. And thank you so much for doing this tonight, Greg.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always fun to come here and talk to you, Chris. And I always appreciate when you ask me, and thanks for doing that.
And as long as the Lions aren't playing the Eagles, I'll be cheering for the silver and blue on Sunday. But they need to stay to those colors. But it looks like the Eagles and the Lions are going to be wearing their black uniforms on Sunday.
Okay. All right.
Thanks a lot, Greg.
My pleasure, my friend.
Have a good night.
Well, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
You too. Have a good night. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, guys, that wraps up season 9, episode 33, overall 473 of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by Wellington Brewery at 950 Woodlawn Road West here in Guelph, Ontario. Check out their website, wellingtonbrewery.ca. Try a welly on, and please remember to drink responsibly. And sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Before we wrap up this show, guys, I'm going to play a little video clip of a post-game interview I did this past Saturday night at the KeyBank Center in downtown Buffalo. The Buffalo Bandits home opener and banner raising ceremony. And the Bandits came through with a 13-6 win over Rochester. And I got to speak to Buffalo Bandits superstar Dane Smith, who had 2 goals, 8 assists, 10 points in their win against Rochester. This is courtesy of my YouTube channel, and please remember to hit subscribe.
It's just like, I didn't really get to take it all in, to be honest. It kind of flew by. I know I've been to Sabres games now, and I catch myself looking up quite a bit now. And to know that that's going to be there forever, it's an amazing feeling.
Do you worry a little bit going in that can be a little bit distraction, that you're going to have to force yourself to make it a good start, which you got tonight?
Yeah, most definitely. I think JT made it a point to remind us of that. I think our leaders did a great job of reminding our players, again, we're here to win a game, and obviously to cherish that moment, because it doesn't happen that often, but remember that what got us there, and we need to win this team to do it again. So it was important for us to have a good start, and I think we did.
Second straight year you've had one of these nights. Any difference the second time around from the first time, and did maybe going through that experience last year make you feel like it helped you guys this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy feeling. Like, I was nervous all day. It was I don't usually typically get nervous till playoffs, but this game, it felt like it was a finals. Obviously, give credit to a sold out crowd. It gave me goosebumps, and it felt like we obviously had so much time to think about playing in the home opener, because we didn't start the first few games. It felt like this was the first game of the year, and it was pretty special.
Dean, it's going since the last 6 games of last year. You finished season 6-1, 5-0 in the playoffs. Now you're 3-0 to start this season. What is the vibe? What is working so well that you guys just seem to be clicking on all 3 facets of the game?
Yeah, I think they did a great job of keeping the same group together. It's important to start off with a good start. Like last year, we didn't, unfortunately, but that's how it goes. This league is so good, and you can't take it for granted. I think bringing in the same group in training camp, I felt like, hey, we didn't lose a beat, and to kind of keep going, we got to take it game by game, because we know it can slip out at any point. But the new standings are so crazy, because every game matters, right? Because you don't get to play so many teams that many times. But I think it's a great start. But now in Toronto, which is a huge thing. But also, it sucks because we have a bye week every week till February. So it's important to make sure, obviously, we practice hard. In the off time, that we stay in touch and we're working hard because it's been tough to find rhythm and whatnot.
How much are you?
The 5 weeks though, does it help at all? Because I mean, you, Ian, Josh, you guys have played so much lacrosse in the 12 months. Is having maybe some of these bye weeks helping at all? Maybe just recuperate just a little bit extra.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to get going. I mean, I've been in a rhythm. Yes, I would like some time off, but felt like a month off was good enough for me. I don't know how to take time off, so which is a good thing. Obviously, you're competing at the highest level and you're winning, and it means you're going a long time. But this every other week it's tough to kind of get in a rhythm, and I rather these bye weeks, maybe one in March, one in April, leading in, because we're gonna have 12 games in 10 weeks down the stretch. Obviously, strike the schedule. They didn't do us any favors, but we're ready for the what comes out of this.
Have you seen Matt Vince play any better than that?
Oh my gosh, I know it's so hard because you're seeing Kyle Buchanan, you're seeing say it could be their last year. It might be that you just hear rumblings, and obviously they're playing like they can play 5 more years, and it's just like, hey, you guys, come on, please keep going. And but it's special for sure, and you want to play every game like it's your last, because these guys aren't going to be around forever. And Vino's a backbone, like I said, and ever since we've gotten them, we've been a competing playoff team.
Thoughts on your upcoming opponents, the Toronto Rock, and also you got 3 more home games coming up in a row. How important is it to keep the home field advantage by winning these games?
Yeah, home field advantage is very important, obviously, to play in front of a sold-out crowd like that. We want to make sure they keep coming, obviously, and I think that was an exciting game for them to be a part of. And like you said, you want to defend your home because it's that important. Our goal is to make playoffs, obviously, and then our second goal is to have home field advantage, because you see it when we went on our 5-goal run at the beginning of the game. The crowd gets into it. It's hard. I've been in games where the other team's crowd got into it, and it's hard to kind of bounce back. So it's important to kind of have them on our side.
How did you and the team stay composed with that little bit of the late run that Rochester had towards the end of the second quarter and not let things kind of get any worse?
Yeah, I feel like we were playing great all game. Obviously, we ran into a little bit of penalty trouble, but obviously the scoreboard, they're going to make some calls that maybe they shouldn't have. But that being said, we had so many opportunities offensively that just weren't going in the back of the net. I give credit to their goalie. He played really well, even though the score obviously showed different. He played really well, kept them in it. And we knew as an offense that we were getting so many opportunities, and our defense just gets so many stops throughout the year. So it's amazing.
Dane, scoring 22 seconds into the game, coming off of the banner raising ceremony. Is there a way to describe just how that felt?
Yeah, it's amazing. Whenever you're an offensive guy and the first one falls, it kind of gets you in the game early. I didn't really expect it, but it was amazing. To hear the crowd go crazy. It's important, obviously, and I speak for all offensive guys. So when the first one falls, you feel like you're going to have a good night. So, yeah.
For any memories coming back to you once for that picture that you guys took the team, and you got to hold the trophy, did any memories from last year getting to hold it again, kind of come back in that moment?
Yeah, definitely. It's so hard to balance enjoying the moment, but also knowing that you have to play a game as well. And it's a special moment, and we were able to cherish it, and obviously get this win. It was the most important thing, and we want to keep doing that.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. That was courtesy of my YouTube channel. And please hit the subscribe and like notification. I want to say thank you to my 518 subscribers. And I'm getting very close to 300,000 views. So that was Dane Smith, the Kitchener, Ontario native, speaking to the local media and myself after the Bandits home opener banner ceremony, raising 13-6 win over Rochester. Dane Smith, number 92, had 2 goals, 8 assists, and 10 points. Josh Burns had 11 points in that game, and Matt Vince had 62 saves, a franchise record for the Buffalo Bandits. Their next home game is Friday, January 10th at 7:30 against the 0-4 Toronto Rock at the KeyBank Center. You can get tickets at bandits.com. Before we wrap up this show, guys, my next live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership and Wellington Brewery here in Guelph, is going to be Friday, January 3rd, which is tomorrow. Friday, January 3rd, tomorrow at 11 a.m. with my special guest, Kevin Allen, the former longtime hockey writer with the U.S. Today for 34 years. He's now a hockey columnist with Detroit Hockey Now. And Kevin Allen has covered the Red Wings for many decades. Kevin's going to come on and speak to us about the 24-25 Detroit Red Wings, the recent firing of head coach Derek Lalonde, and the new head coach Todd McClellan, and whether this Red Wing team can make a push for a playoff spot this year as well. So Kevin Allen will be my guest tomorrow at 11 a.m. And I have another show tomorrow night at 7:15 p.m. Her name is Blank Stare Comedy, and she has an interesting story to share with us. She was a jail guard for 5 years, and now she's into the comedy industry. So Kevin Allen tomorrow at 11 a.m. and Blank Stare Comedy at 7:15 on Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show. Brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership and Wellington Brewery. And I want to say thank you to everyone watching this live stream on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter/X, and Instagram, and on all my audio platforms as well. And before we wrap this up, thank you to Greg Eno, again, the co-host of the Knee Jerks podcast, for coming on and talking Lions and Red Wings tonight with us. Please follow Greg Eno on Twitter X, and also subscribe to his Substack. Greg writes some great articles about Detroit sports teams as well. And check out his podcast show with Nick and Big Al called the Knee Jerk Podcast as well. That's about it for the first episode. This is episode 1 in the year 2025. And I want to wish everybody a happy new year, 2025. And I'm just very thankful that I'm back feeling healthy again after my food poisoning bout in Buffalo last Saturday night. That was quite the experience. But that's about it for tonight's episode, guys. And I've got more shows coming tomorrow. 2 more shows tomorrow. Kevin Allen at 11 o'clock, and at 7:15 tomorrow night, Blank Stare Comedy. And then next week, I have Adam Batacci from Tony McGee's Football Plus from Washington on my show on Monday night at 7 o'clock to talk Washington Commanders. So I'm working hard on getting more great guests this year. And this is my 5th year as a talk show host and 5 years of doing Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show. So that wraps up for the show for tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. with Kevin Allen from Detroit Hockey Now, talking Red Wings hockey. I hope everybody has a great night, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow for another edition of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by Wellington Brewery and Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership here in Guelph. Good night, everybody.